and welcome to yet another episode of the Deliberate Talks podcast, 8th to be more precise, and I'm your host, Dakshin Adyanthaya, to be more precise. And in today's episode, to be more precise, we are going to talk about a form of marketing in which the focal point is placed on specific key individuals rather than the entire market to promote the brand or service. In short, I'm emphasizing on the term influencer marketing. Now, did you know, according to a survey conducted by the Influencer Marketing Hub, a business makes up to $5 for every $1 that's spent in this form of marketing. In fact, the top 13 businesses go on to generate up to $20. Also, Instagram continues to be the most preferred platform for brands for influencer marketing, while YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook follows closely. And Twitter partnered analytics study of receptivity of influencers on Twitter highlighted that 40% of people actually purchased a product after seeing it being promoted by an influencer on that platform. Also, a study put together by Hype Auditor and a good company highlighted that 16 million accounts of Indian influencers and 49 million accounts of influencers in US were fake. Busted! And hashtags with coronavirus, COVID-19, COVID, pandemic and coronavirus outbreak from almost 8 lakh influencer posts has resulted in an incredible 2.9 million engagements across the world. And that was the uber cool facts for today. So it's time to meet our guest and converse in depth about this topic. But before that,
this is the Deliberate Talks Weekly Podcast, powered by the Pixelated Egg Digital Ventures. Tune in every week to learn something new about digital marketing and entrepreneurship. And now, over to the voice of your host, Dakshin Adyanthaya. Enjoy the show.
So, in today's episode, we have a graduate from Harvard with a degree in applied math. He quit his job to travel the world and visit almost 70 countries. He launched his first company called Ninja Outreach, an influencer marketing firm at the age of 26, and sold it when he turned 30. Today, he runs a digital marketing unagency, as he likes to call it, known as the Shortlist.io. Here's introducing David Schneider.
Hey Dakshin, how you doing?
I'm doing great, David. How are you doing?
Doing well.
Thank you for being a part of the Deliberate Talks podcast.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
David, I got to say you got a very interesting story in your bio itself.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I had the perfect 2-minute story, I guess.
Amazing. I really want to know, and I'm going to start with your bios, which says 70 countries and serial entrepreneur. Tell me about your ethos. How much of this was planned and how much of this actually happened to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in many ways it's 50-50. 50% was that we did plan to, do a lot of traveling and maybe start a business. This was my wife and I, although she was my girlfriend at the time, back in around 2012. We had been working in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years. And we wanted to quit our jobs to go backpacking. So we had saved up some money. And the plan was to travel for 1 to 2 years. And essentially, maybe start a business. We were running a travel blog and just kind of see what happened. But the more likely scenario was that we were going to kind of head back to the U.S. and maybe I was going to go to business school and get my master's or something like that. Mm-hmm. As it turned out, we started to make some progress with the blog, writing about our travels. Companies in the travel space were interested in partnering with us to kind of sponsor and they essentially paid us enough money for us to travel in many parts of the world. So we decided to keep going. We traveled in Asia and Europe and South America, a little bit in Africa. We did a road trip in the US. And so this 1 to 2 year trip ended up lasting about 5 or so years. When eventually we just felt that we had been on the road for so much, we really kind of wanted to settle down and get a home. And that's where I am now in Philadelphia. So during that time, we went to, around 70 or so countries, I believe. And I also started influencer marketing software, that being Ninja Outreach, which I started in around 2014. So we were about 2 or so years into our travels. And then I sold in 2018, which was just as we were basically coming back from our travels.
I'm going to come to your travel stories a little later on. Hold on to that. But first, let's talk about your first software product. The influencer marketing portal which you mentioned, the Ninja Outreach. Firstly, a pretty cool name. I want to know what was the story behind coming up with that name. And secondly, what was the platform all about and what customer or client problem were you trying to solve with the software service?
Yeah, so regarding the name, my partner and I weren't particularly creative. What we did was we came up with a bunch of words that were related to outreach and also a bunch of words that we felt were maybe an interesting and memorable character or something that, would basically make the name stand out a bit more. And then we just did all the permutations of all the different ones together, something in the front, something in the back, basically mix and matching them to see what domain names were available. Ninja Outreach was available. No one had taken it, and we liked that it had outreach in it, which we thought made it very clear what the software did, and that everybody could kind of get around Ninja, that we kind of build a brand around that, that it would define the colors in the logo and things like that.
Hmm.
As for, what the software actually did, the vision of the software was that it was going to be an all-in-one prospecting and outreach tool for influencer marketing. So influencer marketing is when brands want to connect with online influencers, bloggers, people who have a large audience, and partner with them to essentially have them, represent their products. Kind of like what I said I was doing in the travel blogging space. That brands were kind of reaching out to us and they were asking us to promote their tools and services. And this is kind of a way for brands and bloggers to kind of work together. We thought that there was space in the market for a relatively low price tool that did both outreach and prospecting and outreach. There were quite a number of tools that were very high end in the space that were not affordable for small businesses. And also there were a lot of tools that did prospecting or outreach, but not really very many that did both at the time. So that was kind of the idea of the platform. We had a lot of people using it for various reasons. Sometimes it was link building or content marketing, or even a handful of people would use it for sales from time to time.
Hmm.
But influencer marketing was always kind of the intention.
Great. Let's talk about shortlist.io now. You mentioned your exit from Ninja Outreach at around when you were 30 and then starting up with shortlist.io. You also term it as an unagency solutions to your client. Tell me a little bit more about the business model of your unagency.
Yeah, so Shortlist.io came about after selling Ninja Outreach, and I started to do a little bit of SEO and link building for myself for my other projects. And I decided that the best way to kind of go about running a service for yourself that I wanted done was to also offer it to other individuals who would then essentially pay for it and fund kind of the activity. So I wanted to build links to a tool that I had bought, but I didn't really want to pay for links. So I created a link building service and had clients pay me to build links. And then I was able to include mine as well as I kind of went through everything. And so that link building SEO service became kind of the first service for our agency. It wasn't shortlist.io at the time until at some point I partnered with David Hensel, who's the former CMO of Max CDN,
Mhm.
and he said, "Hey, I really like what you're doing here, and I think that my network would be great for growing this service. Why don't we kind of brand this as shortlist.io?" He already had the domain name, and we thought it was cool because it was easy to remember, and it was this idea of maybe getting shortlisted in the search engine, that you were kind of like moving to the top, cutting the line type of a thing.
Mhm.
And then, essentially we went from there. As to why we call it an agency, while it does share some similarities with a more standard digital marketing agency,
Mhm.
some of the ways in which we're different are the way we essentially, at least one of the services, is to put a growth marketer in another person's company.
Mhm.
So often with agencies, a client hires the agency and the agency kind of works within its sort of bubble and then delivers things. And it's just kind of like they're very separate, the client and the agency. We kind of merged the two. With certain clients. We basically, they almost hire members of our team as kind of outsourced marketers, and those marketers become somewhat of a member of the client's team. They join their Slack channel. They learn all about their business model. They meet everyone else on the team, and they work from within the client. We felt that this was a necessary way for someone to actually be able to kind of positively impact, a company's bottom line and really build their marketing strategy, that they had to really know the company intimately, that it wasn't sort of a one size fits all approach for all
Mhm.
clients. And so that's kind of why we called it an agency.
Nice. And from the pricing model in comparison to the industry standards of a digital marketing agency, is your solutions more affordable?
Yeah, I think it really depends on obviously the digital marketing agency that you might be hiring, because some will charge a lot and some will charge a little. The fact that we work with labor that's kind of outsourced, typically Eastern Europe is where everybody we have is from. I would say our prices are not more than mid range, to be honest. There are definitely cheaper options out there. That's always the case, but I wouldn't say we're high end. We work with a lot of businesses of very very modest size.
Right. Now, rooting back to your conversation and experience in influencer marketing, David, let's be honest. The term influencer marketing is very abused or is misused as a profession. With a lot of creators relying on bots to jump up their numbers, how do you think you can evaluate genuinity of these influencers today? Say, even as Shortlist.io or even as Ninja Outreach, if someone wants a marketing strategy for influencer marketing, what's the approach like?
Yeah, it is difficult because obviously when money enters a space, people are going to look for a way to sort of manipulate and to achieve some sort of edge. And so, like you mentioned, bots to increase one's following and things like that. And that's why I always think the best kind of metrics to look for are engagement, really making sure that the influencers audience is really engaging with them, that they're getting a good number of say likes or comments or shares per post, and that audience is legitimate, that they are not fake. And there are I don't know if there's 100% solutions out there, but there are certainly tools that can take a look at somebody's following or audience and kind of tell you what percentage of them are real for most social media platforms. And it is definitely trickier to fake engagement, but that doesn't mean that can't be faked either. But nonetheless, I think that engagement and relevancy are kind of the two big ones, because somebody may have a large audience, that audience may even be engaged, but if it's not really relevant to your brand, then it doesn't really matter. So just understanding the demographic of that audience, the geography of that audience, the interest of that audience, I think those are the couple of things that are going to really matter, change, whether or not the campaign is successful. It's not always the person with the biggest audience that's kind of the best influencer to target, but it's finding that balance between engagement and relevancy.
Right. But just speaking again about relevancy, David, leave aside what people think. Personally, what is your opinion about bots? Is there a part of you which says it's completely fine to have a mix of it? Or what is your opinion about bots and unethically upping your numbers?
I mean, I suppose the technical answer is, and everybody should be doing exactly what was intended, which is nobody should be using bots and stuff like that. That's kind of the technical answer. It's kind of hard to say anything other than that. The reality is that as an influencer, you're also trying to stay competitive,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to stand out as well. And occasionally, maybe using some sort of tools can kind of help. I know, for example, certain influencers in spaces, they have found that it's really important to say get over the 10,000 follower mark. For
Right.
example, let's say that's just like a sort of a guideline for brands to say, oh, we want to see people with at least 10,000 followers. So maybe you got to 9,000 or 9,500 followers all the normal way, but you just need a boost to kind of get going. So you might utilize a tool that does some sort of following and unfollowing
Mm-hmm.
methodology, which many marketers are familiar with. Follow people, they often follow you back, and then you unfollow them so that you don't have kind of an improper ratio between followers and followers. And that gets you to 10,000, and then you turn it off. Is that the worst thing in the world? No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, you're just kind of trying to just get a little bit more notice. But inevitably, if your whole strategy is based on bots and stuff like that, I think at the end of the day, yeah, it will show in terms of the engagement that you'll have poor engagement numbers, and you'll actually be shooting yourself in the foot.
Right. Interesting conversations often take place on the internet, and this is a question that most of the clients have for agencies and marketers as well. What's the value of influencer marketing when it comes to conversions and sales? Activities with goals based on reach, impression, and clicks are achievable, but what about sales? Let's take a classic example of the internet star who couldn't sell 36 t-shirts to her 2.6 million followers. Now, the whole conversation there was when you have over 2 million followers and they don't lead to conversions for the brand. Do you think the brand expectations are too high, or is it just a medium not to look for sales unless you associate with a celebrity?
Yeah, it's difficult because on the one hand, yeah, maybe client expectations are too high because outside of just direct sales from somebody's audience, I mean, there is a lot of benefit from just kind of getting the exposure. I mean, why do people pay to put things on billboards and so many other things that they're kind of, or, to be in a magazine? I mean, a lot of it is just to kind of build awareness, to build impressions. And that does eventually lead to sales. But so many things in marketing, and not just influencer marketing, but like so many different channels are extremely difficult to actually calculate conversions from them. I mean, content marketing, not, no one's really kind of questioning the benefits of content marketing so much nowadays. But, you have a blog post, and how do you really know that leads to a conversion? I mean, most of the time somebody comes on your site, maybe they see that blog post after landing on some other page. Maybe they first landed on that blog post and they kind of go all around the site. Where do you really attribute the conversion? There's so many kind of different attribution formulas that you could kind of pursue. So my point is that I don't think influencer marketing is unlike many marketing channels out there where it is very difficult to apply conversions to it. In that, there is value for sure in impressions and exposure, and a lot of the things that we end up buying and the purchasing decisions that we make is because, we saw it somewhere down the line several times. That said, I mean, influencers can often charge a lot of money. And so it is important for the company to feel invested in the outcome, and that they feel that for the amount of money that they're paying, that there's enough value there. And maybe in some cases, impressions just isn't going to cut it for the amount that somebody's cost. So I think it's finding a balance between, the influencers and what the value that they're providing, but also, the companies kind of have to be, comfortable with the results.
So then, according to you, when is the right time to use influencer marketing? I mean, what kind of campaign goals should you look to achieve via influencers?
So I definitely don't think it's for all brands. I know that there's some brands, and they've probably, they've heard a lot about influencer marketing. It's been very trendy over the years, and they feel that, well, I guess I should be trying this. And the reality is that they may not really have a lot of influencers in their space, and that their clients are not really following influencers. And so it just doesn't make sense for them. And so I'd almost say under no circumstances should they do influencer marketing. And then there are other ones where, yeah, it really does just depend on what you sell and whether or not it's something that, is going to, I guess, provide ROI on the value of an influencer marketing campaign. Regardless, I mean, each brand needs to evaluate it individually for themselves. They need to investigate the influencers in their space. They need to look at their audiences. They need to understand what they charge. And all these things need to be taken into consideration, which is the same for any sort of marketing campaign. It just has to be evaluated individually for the company. I think that, but, I think at a minimum, some degree of product market fit, I think we can kind of all agree that that's probably, a minimum for getting the influencer marketing. If you don't have product or service that you've kind of proven that people want to buy, that you've kind of got your copywriting down, you kind of know who your audience is, who you should be targeting, you've made it profitable. Those are sort of, prerequisites, I think, for doing influencer marketing.
Fair point. Now, emphasizing on the credibility of the brands, there are a lot of brands which come into the market, use influencer marketing to reach out there, get the attention that they want. And the next thing that you know is either the brand is shut, they can't meet their logistics, or they can't meet their production numbers, very poor customer care or after sales services. I mean, can you hold the influencers accountable for promoting a brand which they probably didn't know about much, just that the brand would offer them good money to promote it, and a customer or a follower would invest blindly in it because they saw their influencer promote the particular brand or service, and the next thing that you know is they've spent a lot of money but they didn't get the value with the product or service. can they go and hold the influencer responsible for marketing the product as well? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about, brands evaluating influencers, but, it's just as important for influencers to evaluate brands, really. The whole value of the influencer is their credibility. That's like their currency. So if they jeopardize that by working with a brand who, just isn't reputable, has poor customer service, poor product quality, things like that, that'll be the last time anybody really buys from that influencer, right? And they'll still be ruining any chances they have in the future. So the credibility is the most important part. And yeah, influencers really need to make sure that when they work with a brand, that they're bought into that brand's mission and the product, and that they've tried it and that they like it, and that they disclose these things.
True, true. Right. Another conversation is again more on the lines of the responsibility of the influencer, like you rightly mentioned. Speaking on behalf of a brand, what about brand loyalty, David? Where does that lie when it comes to influencer marketing? Today an influencer is promoting a brand A, and they say that this brand is the best brand, and the next week, they go for brand B and say this brand is the best brand. So where does the loyalty lie today in the modern practices of influencer marketing?
Yeah, it really depends on how the influencer kind of works with the brand. On the one hand, if they work with a brand and they say, "Hey, look, this is my go-to provider for X product. This is like the facial cream that I use. I use this every day. I've been using this for 6 months. It's the only one I recommend." And then next week they mention a competitor because that competitor paid them a lot of money. That would raise a lot of eyebrows, right? That is probably not something that you want to do. On the other hand, if you were to say, well, look, this is a new face cream that I'm trying. I've been sent it from the company. I'm trying a bunch of different face creams. So I'm going to report on all of them. And next week, I'm going to have a different one to take a look at. I'm going to kind of give you my honest assessment. I don't think there's anything wrong with that or unfair with that, as long as, again, the brands kind of know what they're getting and the influencers are kind of know how they're going to approach it. So it's just about, again, it's about credibility, and it's about, is there anything where the influencer sort of indicated that they are loyal to this particular brand and it would be strange for them promoting another one? Or are they simply being a messenger? They're just leveraging their platform as a way to, promote influence information and to try to give an unbiased review of different products, even ones that may be competing with each other. I think, any of those, that could be fine as well.
Okay. Great, David. Now, from a Ninja Outreach point of view, again, this is a kind of question that I also put to a lot of my other guests, because the beauty about stories, be it success stories or failure stories, always inspires others to do something good and better. Tell me about Ninja Outreach, or even Shortlist.io. Do you have an interesting case study or a brand case which you're very proud of and which you can share with us?
Well, let's see. I mean, there's a combination of, but also in many ways, because it was a software, not a service, people used it, and in many cases, we didn't always know, what they were doing and what the results of that was, as opposed to, say, in an agency where they were kind of running a service. I will say that, we often used the tool ourselves, which was we did a lot of influencer marketing at Ninja Outreach, because we wanted to work with bloggers. We wanted to provide them the software, so that they could talk about it. Some influencers were happy to take the software on for free, and that with a free account, they would promote it. Others were looking for money. Both of those, were totally fine. And I think that a lot of what helped Ninja Outreach get known in the space was all of the bloggers and influencers that we worked with. Sometimes when I talk about Ninja Outreach, obviously many people don't know it. It's not like Salesforce or something. But in the marketing space, it's a fairly well-known tool. People always seem to think the company was a lot bigger than it was. They would, "Oh wow, you guys were huge," and it's like, actually, we weren't really that big. We were just a small team in a relatively small company. I think we just created the impression that we were large because people saw us in so many different places. And so I think that influencer marketing for us really worked quite well.
Right. Okay. Nice. Now let's get back to your travel stories, David. I'm sure there are a lot of people who actually think about balancing work and travel. So tell me about a little more in terms of your travel sponsorships. How did you go about cracking those kind of plans? So, what are the starting tips for influencers or non influencers or bloggers who really want to plan these trips, get the right kind of sponsors, and go and travel as much as possible?
Sure. So, well, at least with travel blogging, I'll be honest, a lot of the success that we had with that somewhat fell into our lap. I mean, we were doing the right things. We created a nice website, we were writing nice content, we were doing the types of things that would attract brand, and we were hoping that these would be the right things as well. But to say that it was 100% planned from the beginning would also not be true. We were lucky enough that brands reached out to us and we learned that that was a thing, that was a way that people made money in the travel blogging niche, and then we were able to essentially get more brands, get introductions to new brands from other travelers that we met or that we talked to online, and kind of build from there. Whether or not that would work today, because that was a number of years ago, I'm not even sure, because these things are changing so often and whatnot. But that was kind of how we did it. Working and traveling, I have to say, while it is, at least to a lot of amazing experiences, we were able to visit all these different countries and fund them. And I think that, it's nothing really bad I can say about that. But one should know that, if you're working and you're traveling, you're sort of never really doing the best at either of them, because your mind is always in two places. Sometimes I was traveling, but I was like thinking about my work, and I was thinking about, and I was rushing to get back to work, and I was probably not really always enjoying the places that I was in as much as I should have been.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, a lot of times with work, I always felt like I was not living up to expectations, and I was a bottleneck, and I was not sitting in front of my computer long enough or often enough, and I was time differences and poor internet and all these things were kind of getting in the way. I felt like I wasn't really maximizing my work potential either. And so I think that for us, that was the right decision at the time, because it was the only way to be able to do both. But nowadays, I also enjoy having time when I'm really focused on work, and then maybe going to travel and be able to kind of put the laptop away, and actually just make the whole trip about the destination. So that one's certainly to each their own. But I can say that if you are interested in working and traveling, then you definitely need to be in a digital space, because being able to kind of run a business from your laptop is what makes this whole thing work, and this what's created this whole sort of movement of digital nomads.
Right.
And there are a lot of people out there doing it, and it's not always a software business. It can be a service or an e-commerce site or a million other things. It doesn't really matter, just that they're running it out of their laptop.
And also from a travel point of view and your Ninja outreach, did you get an opportunity to work with a lot of international influencers and bloggers as well?
I would not say so. No, I mean, we worked with, for Ninja Hours, we worked with, influencers. Certainly, they were from different countries. Yes, that much is true. Sometimes when with bloggers, so it was mostly more with bloggers as opposed to, say, people who had a large following on, say, Instagram or something like that. So it was a little bit of a different style of influencer than people normally think of. But I never really met any of them in person or anything like that. It was just mostly working with bloggers.
Right. As we speak about even working with international influencers, different countries have different cultures. Say, if I want to work with or collaborate with an influencer from a different country, what are the things that I should consider while planning an influencer marketing campaign?
Well, I think, you have to understand, getting back to what I mentioned earlier, it's important to understand the audience that the influencer has, and making sure that it's your audience. And so if an influencer is, they're Chinese, for example, and they have a large audience in China, then you want to make sure that you are interested in promoting to the Chinese market
Mhm.
when you kind of pair up with them. It doesn't matter that they might have 1 million followers or something like that. If they're all from China and you don't ship to China, that's
Right.
not really going to be a good recipe for success. So presumably, if you are choosing to work with an international influencer and you recognize that their audience is likely to be from a different country, I would assume you would know already exactly the cultural guidelines you should be following, because you should know that that's the audience that you're targeting. That's kind of what you're going to get. I believe that different cultures have maybe a different way of talking about products and services, as well as what they're willing to maybe take pictures of or to wear, or different things like that. How an influencer has promoted something in the past is always a good idea to have an idea of what you're likely to get. How have they reviewed other products and services before? Do you like the style in which they review something? I think that's a good proxy to kind of understand a priori what you're going to get.
Nice. So, David, now we're going to move to my favorite segment of the show, which is a rapid fire round. And rapid fire questions, you need to be very prompt at answering. So, are you ready for this?
I will do my best. Yes.
Super. Because you have traveled a lot, 5 of your favorite markets to professionally be associated with, or 5 of your favorite places to go.
5 favorite places: Croatia, Greece, Japan, France, South Africa.
Great. Apart from Ninja Outreach, what are the tools for influencer marketing that brands should consider?
Ahrefs, if you're doing any sort of link building or content marketing. Mailshake, fantastic outreach tool. Well, I guess those are my top 2.
Okay. 3 tips for people who aspire to become influencers. What do you suggest them to do right?
Credibility is your currency, so make sure that you are always protecting that above all. Focus on your audience, your niche. You don't necessarily have to have the largest audience, but you want to have an engaged audience of individuals that are relevant and hopefully homogenous, because that's going to be what's attracting brands. And then outreach to brands. You can't just sit back and expect people to kind of get in touch with you. You have to put yourself out there. You have to find brands as well.
Mm-hmm. Some of the best brands you think who do influencer marketing right?
I'm not even sure. I'm thinking of like larger brands, maybe like Geico or Capital One or something like that. I know that those guys work with a lot of influencers. I think of like Alexander Ovechkin in Capital One. Is like the fact that I can recall that makes it seem as though that has probably stuck out in my head. So I guess I'll give them some credit.
Okay. Work to travel or travel to work? What's your motto in life?
It is more, I guess I'm in between because I've done both of them, 50-50.
Okay. Some of the influencers you have thoroughly enjoyed collaborating with.
I mean, for me, it's just more in the marketing niche. So these aren't going to be kind of household names, but I've been on podcasts with guys like Spencer Haas, or Entrepreneur on Fire, John. A lot of great people there.
Great stuff, David. Fantastic. That was prompt.
Friend us on your socials and let's connect.
Superb. And before we conclude, here's a question that we have identified from the internet universe related to influencer marketing. And the question goes around saying, I have around 5,000 followers on Instagram. How do I go about getting more brand associations, and what is the kind of remuneration that I can expect?
Yeah, so I mentioned the 10,000 number, for example, and this is not a hard and fast rule, but it is certainly one that I have seen kind of be the case. In certain niches. I hate to say, well, you've got 5,000, you need to get 10,000, and then later on, hey, you've got 10,000, you need to get 20,000. But I do think that getting more followers is going to be important here. 5,000 is a very good number, but it may not be enough for the majority of brands. When you do have a good number of followers, 5 to 10,000 or more, joining some influencer marketing platforms where brands can find you is a good start. As for the amount of money that you can kind of expect, everybody kind of sets their own rates. Every niche is different in terms of what people are going to be willing to pay for. Maybe you could get a couple $100s, for example, for reviewing a product or a service. I would say that's kind of the likely space. It's unlikely to be in the thousands, and or to be $50 or $25 either. But again, there's a lot of different amounts for what you provide. So for example, if it's a full-on review, that might be a couple $100, but if it's just a quick post or a series of posts on Instagram, that could be $75 or something like that. So it does depend. But I think that, getting more followers, however you got the first 5,000, think about how you can get the next, joining some influencer marketing platforms to get yourself out there so brands can find you, and then experimenting with different rates, and you'll kind of figure it out from there.
Great. Nice. Fantastic, David. That's pretty much the end of what I have for you. And this has been thoroughly a good conversation. And thank you so much for being a part of the Deliberate Talks podcast. It was great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
So that's it for today's episode. And if you are someone who has been dreaming about being an influencer or getting the influencer marketing right, this has been a productive conversation for you. So join in next week for another conversation with another guest. If you have any feedback, feel free to write to thedeliberate.talks@gmail.com, or you can follow us on the social media platforms of The Deliberate Talks and the Pixelated Egg Digital Ventures. Until next week, inspire and be inspired.